My name is Vicki, and I just turned 57 years old. For 15 years, I raised my 2 grandchildren as my own after my daughter abandoned them at my doorstep. Now she stands before me with a lawyer accusing me of kidnapping her children. How could she betray me like this after I sacrificed everything? The judge was speechless when I revealed what was in that envelope. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're viewing from and hit that like and subscribe button. The ending of this story might surprise you as much as it did me. I used to be a retired nurse living in the quiet suburbs of Maine. 3 years before my grandchildren came into my life, I lost my husband Arthur to cancer. He fought bravely for 18 months, but the disease eventually took him from me. After his passing, I lived alone in our family home trying to find purpose in my solitary existence. My relationship with my only daughter, Amanda, had always been complicated. Since her teenage years, we constantly butted heads. She was stubborn, rebellious, and determined to do exactly the opposite of whatever I advised. When she turned 18, Amanda packed her bags and left without saying goodbye. I was heartbroken, but also somewhat relieved that our daily arguments had finally ceased. 3 years passed before I heard from her again. She showed up at my doorstep 6 months pregnant with nowhere else to go. The father, a man named Brian, had already disappeared from the picture. Despite our troubled past, I welcomed her home. I thought maybe this baby would be the turning point in our relationship, something that would finally bring us together. When little Jackson was born, I fell in love with my grandson immediately. Amanda seemed to try her best at motherhood for the first few months, but soon her old patterns returned. She would stay out late, leave Jackson with me for days at a time, and never held a job for more than a few weeks. 2 years later, she had another child, Lily, with Brian, who had briefly returned before vanishing again permanently. I became increasingly concerned about how Amanda was raising the children. Whenever I visited her small apartment, it was in complete disarray. The refrigerator was often empty, and the children sometimes wore the same clothes for days. Jackson, at 4 years old, was already learning to take care of his 2-year-old sister. It broke my heart to see them growing up in such instability. I tried to help as much as I could without overstepping. I paid Amanda's rent when she fell behind, bought groceries, and took the children for weekends to give her a break. Those weekends became the highlight of my life. Jackson would sit on my lap as I read him stories, his little face lighting up at the adventures of his favorite characters. Lily would follow me around the kitchen wanting to help with everything I did. They brought joy and purpose back into my life after Arthur died. I remember taking them to the local park one Sunday afternoon. Jackson conquered the monkey bars for the first time, his face beaming with pride. Lily collected dandelions, carefully presenting each one to me as if they were precious treasures. That day, watching them play in the golden afternoon sunlight, I felt a completeness I hadn't experienced since becoming a widow. Little did I know how significant these moments would become. Despite the joy the children brought me, I worried constantly about their well-being when they returned to Amanda. I suggested parenting classes offered to help her find a stable job, but my attempts were met with accusations that I was trying to control her life. Our conversations inevitably turned into arguments that left us both frustrated and hurt. Still, I persisted because I loved my grandchildren too much to stand by and watch them suffer. One particularly difficult evening, after finding Jackson trying to warm up a can of soup for his sister because Amanda was sleeping off a hangover, I confronted my daughter about her parenting. She exploded, accusing me of never believing in her and always expecting the worst. I left in tears, wondering if I was indeed being too hard on her. Perhaps she was doing the best she could with the limited resources and support she had. After all, being a single mother to 2 young children was no easy task. That night, I called my friend Susan, who had been my rock since Arthur passed. She listened patiently as I poured out my concerns about Amanda and the children. Susan suggested that instead of criticizing Amanda, perhaps I could find ways to support her more constructively. I took her advice to heart and decided to try a gentler approach. Little did I know that this chance for reconciliation would never come. It was a rainy Saturday morning in October when my life changed forever. The wind howled outside my windows, sending leaves swirling through the air. I was just settling down with my morning coffee and a book when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found Amanda standing there soaking wet with Jackson and Lily beside her. Each child clutched a small backpack that seemed stuffed to capacity. "Mom, I need a huge favor," Amanda said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I have a job interview. It could change everything for us. Can you watch the kids for an hour? I promise I will be right back." Something felt off immediately. For one thing, Amanda was dressed in a way I had never seen before. She wore a stylish coat I didn't recognize and sleek leather boots that must have cost more than her monthly rent. Her hair was freshly colored and styled. This was not the Amanda who usually showed up at my door in sweatpants and a ponytail. The children also had far more belongings with them than would be needed for a brief visit. Their backpacks were bulging, and Amanda had 2 additional duffel bags that she quickly set inside my entryway. "These are just some extra clothes and toys in case they get bored," she explained when she noticed my questioning look. "The interview might run a little longer than expected. It is out of town." A sense of unease crept up my spine, but the children were already hugging my legs, and Jackson was asking if we could make pancakes. How could I refuse them? Besides, if Amanda really did have a job opportunity, I wanted to support her efforts to improve their situation. "All right," I agreed reluctantly. "But please keep your phone on. Let me know if you will be later than expected." Amanda nodded quickly, then knelt down to hug her children. I noticed she held them longer than usual, breathing in deeply as if memorizing their scent. When she pulled away, her eyes were glistening. "Be good for Grandma," she whispered, her voice catching slightly. Before turning to leave, Amanda pressed a sealed envelope into my hands. "This is just some important information you might need. Emergency contacts and stuff. Only open it if you absolutely have to, okay?" There was something in her eyes as she looked at her children one last time. A finality that sent a chill through me. It was as if she was taking a mental photograph, knowing she would need to recall this image later. But before I could question her further, she was gone, hurrying through the rain to her car. I distracted the children with pancakes and games, but as the morning wore on, both began asking for their mother. Jackson kept looking out the window, and Lily grew increasingly fussy, asking, "When Mommy back?" repeatedly. 1 hour stretched into 2, then 3. I called Amanda's cell phone several times, but it went straight to voicemail. By late afternoon, I had fed the children lunch, put Lily down for a nap, and played countless rounds of Go Fish with Jackson. Each passing hour intensified my worry. "When is Mommy coming back?" Jackson asked for the 20th time, his little face creased with worry. "Soon, sweetheart," I said, but the reassurance felt hollow even to my own ears. By early evening, with still no word from Amanda, I decided to look through the children's bags, hoping to find some clue about what was happening. Each backpack contained several changes of clothes, all their favorite toys, photo albums, and even their medical records. These were not the belongings of children who would be picked up in an hour. With trembling hands, I finally opened the envelope Amanda had given me. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a handwritten letter. "Mom, I cannot do this anymore. I am not cut out to be a mother. I am leaving them with you because I know you love them and will give them what I cannot. Please do not try to find me. By the time you read this, I will be far away. I am signing the enclosed form to give you legal guardianship. I am sorry for everything. Amanda. The second document was a notarized temporary guardianship authorization signed and dated the previous day. She had planned this. She had known all along she was not coming back. My knees buckled and I sank to the floor, the papers clutched in my shaking hands. A wave of emotions crashed over me: shock, anger, grief, and overwhelming fear. What would I tell the children? How could I possibly raise 2 young kids at my age? And how could Amanda do this to her own flesh and blood? I tried calling her again and again, each time reaching only her voicemail. I called Brian, the children's father, but his number had been disconnected. I even called some of Amanda's friends, but none had seen her or knew of her plans. That night, after finally getting the children to sleep in my spare bedroom, I sat alone in my kitchen and wept. Not just for myself or for these innocent children who had been abandoned, but also for my daughter who was so lost that she felt this was her only option. The next morning, I called the local police station to report Amanda missing. The officer who took my call listened patiently, then sighed. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but based on what you've told me, this sounds like a voluntary absence. Since she left a signed guardianship document, this is technically a civil matter, not a criminal one. Your daughter is an adult who chose to leave her children in your care." I felt helpless and frustrated. "But she might be in danger," I insisted. "She might need help." "We can take a missing persons report," the officer conceded. "But with the letter and legal document, it's clear this was premeditated. Have you contacted social services about the guardianship situation?" That was my next call. The social worker I spoke with was more helpful, explaining the steps I needed to take to establish legal temporary guardianship based on the document Amanda had signed. She also connected me with resources for kinship caregivers, the official term for grandparents raising their grandchildren. Reality began to sink in. At 42 years old, I was now the sole caregiver for a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. My quiet retirement had vanished overnight. Within days, I had to transform my home to accommodate 2 small children. I bought child safety locks, converted my sewing room into a bedroom for Jackson, and set up a crib for Lily in what had been my home office. My financial situation became an immediate concern. I had been comfortably retired on Arthur's life insurance and my pension, but that budget did not include raising 2 young children. I called the hospital where I had worked and thankfully secured a part-time position working 3 days a week. Finding childcare was another challenge. After interviewing several daycares, I found one that could take both children on the days I worked, though the cost ate up most of my new salary. Sleep became a luxury. Lily still woke up several times a night, often crying for her mother. Jackson developed nightmares and would crawl into my bed in the early hours, his little body shaking with sobs. During the day, he would often stand by the window watching for his mother's car. The sight broke my heart every time. "When is Mommy coming home?" he would ask. How do you explain abandonment to a 4-year-old? I consulted a child psychologist who advised me to be honest but age-appropriate. She had to go away for a while. I told them, "But you are safe with me and I love you very much." Meanwhile, I was doing everything I could to locate Amanda. I filed reports with police departments in neighboring states. I contacted her old employers and classmates. I joined online groups for families of missing adults. 6 weeks after she left, I hired a private investigator with money I could ill afford to spare. The PI uncovered disturbing information. Amanda had emptied her bank account the day before leaving the children with me. She had sold most of her furniture and valuables in the weeks leading up to her departure. And most telling, she had not paid her final month's rent on her apartment, leaving the landlord with an empty unit and missing tenant. 6 months after Amanda's disappearance, the police called with news. They had found her car abandoned in a long-term parking lot near the Canadian border. The vehicle had been there for months, gathering dust and parking tickets. Inside was nothing but fast food wrappers and an old jacket of Jackson's that brought tears to my eyes when I identified it. My emotions during this time were a hurricane of contradictions. I was furious with Amanda for abandoning her children, for leaving me with this enormous responsibility at this stage of my life. Yet I also worried constantly about her safety and well-being. Was she alive? Was she in trouble? Had someone forced her to leave? Alongside these feelings was the bone-deep exhaustion of suddenly parenting young children again. The sleepless nights, the tantrums, the constant demands for attention and care drained me physically and emotionally. There were moments in the dead of night when both children were finally asleep that I would sit on my bathroom floor and silently sob, wondering how I would find the strength to do it all again the next day. Yet there were also moments of unexpected joy. Jackson's delight when I taught him to ride a bike with training wheels. Lily's first full sentence spoken while pointing to a picture of a cat, "Grandma, I want Kitty." The way they both curled against me during story time, trusting and warm. These moments became my anchors, the reasons to keep going when everything felt impossible. As the months passed with no word from Amanda, I had to make a difficult decision about what to tell the children. The psychologist advised maintaining some connection to their mother while acknowledging the reality of their situation. I kept photos of Amanda displayed in our home and spoke of her with love. "Your mommy loves you very much." I would say, "But she was not able to take care of you right now. That is why you live with me." It was a delicate balance, preserving their connection to their mother without fostering false hopes of her imminent return. I did not want them to feel abandoned or unwanted, but I also could not promise that Amanda would come back when I had no idea if she ever would. After a year of Amanda's absence, and with no signs of her return, my temporary guardianship was set to expire. With the help of a sympathetic attorney who reduced her fees, I petitioned the court for permanent legal guardianship of Jackson and Lily. The process was straightforward given the signed document from Amanda and her prolonged absence. The judge granted my petition, making me the legal guardian of my grandchildren until they reached adulthood. This legal milestone forced me to accept that our temporary situation had become permanent. I needed to create stability for these children who had already experienced too much uncertainty. After much consideration, I decided we needed a fresh start away from the constant reminders and uncomfortable questions from neighbors and acquaintances who knew Amanda. I sold our family home, the house where I had raised Amanda, and shared a life with Arthur. Though painful, the sale provided the financial cushion we needed. We moved to a smaller house in a family-friendly neighborhood about 30 miles away, close enough to keep my part-time job at the hospital, but far enough to begin anew. In our new community, I introduced myself simply as the children's grandmother who was raising them. Most people did not pry further, and those who did received the abbreviated version: their mother was unable to care for them, so I had stepped in. It was the truth, if not the whole truth. The children adapted to our new home with the resilience that continually amazed me. Jackson started kindergarten, where he quickly made friends and showed an aptitude for numbers and puzzles. Lily thrived in preschool 3 mornings a week, coming home with painted masterpieces and songs she had learned. Our new neighbor, Maria, became an unexpected blessing. A widow in her 60s, she had raised 5 children of her own and now lived alone since they had all moved away. She offered to watch the children when I worked late shifts and soon became like family to us. Having another older adult in their lives provided the children with additional stability and gave me occasional moments to catch my breath. Despite these positive developments, the children struggled with the psychological impact of their mother's abandonment. Jackson developed anxiety that manifested in perfectionism and fear of making mistakes. He would become distraught over small errors in his schoolwork, convinced that if he was not good enough, I too would leave him. Lily, who had been younger when Amanda left, had attachment issues. She would become panicked if I was out of her sight for too long, clinging to me at drop-offs and social events. I found a child therapist who specialized in abandonment issues, and we began weekly sessions. Dr. Patterson helped Jackson understand that his mother's leaving had nothing to do with him or anything he had done. She helped Lily develop coping strategies for separation anxiety, and she helped me navigate the complex role of being both grandmother and primary parent. Financially, we got by, though, with little room for extras. My pension and part-time nursing income covered our basic needs. I applied for and received a modest amount of state assistance for kinship caregivers, which helped with the children's health care and child care expenses. I learned to budget strictly clip coupons and find free community activities for the children instead of costly entertainment. As the years passed, we established our own family traditions and rhythms. We celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes and small gatherings of friends. We spent holidays with Maria and her visiting children and grandchildren. We took modest vacations to nearby lakes and state parks, collecting seashells and building sandcastles. Jackson's 7th birthday stands out in my memory. We had a superhero-themed party in our backyard with 5 of his friends from school. He wore a cape I had sewn from an old blue curtain and ran around the yard saving the world from imaginary villains. At the end of the day, as I tucked him into bed, he said, "This was the best birthday ever, Grandma. Thank you for being my superhero." Lily's first dance recital when she was 6 was another milestone. She performed a simple ballet routine with her class, occasionally forgetting the steps, but beaming with pride nonetheless. Watching her on that stage in her tiny pink tutu, I felt Arthur's absence acutely. He should have been there to see his granddaughter shine. Yet I also felt immense gratitude that I was able to be there to capture these precious moments that might otherwise have been lost. Throughout these years, I maintained a folder of information about Amanda. Periodically, I would search for her name online, check with the original detective who had handled her case, and keep an eye on her old social media accounts that remained dormant. I did this partly out of concern for her well-being, partly to be able to answer the increasingly complex questions the children asked as they grew older, and partly because I too needed some kind of closure. But as the children thrived and our life together stabilized, my active searching gradually diminished. Amanda had made her choice, and we had built a life in her absence. While I never stopped wondering where she was or if she was safe, the urgency of finding her faded as we moved forward together. 15 years passed in the blink of an eye. The small children who had once been left on my doorstep were now young adults with bright futures ahead of them. Jackson at 19 had grown into a thoughtful, intelligent young man with his grandfather's quiet strength and analytical mind. He had just finished his freshman year at MIT, where he had received a partial scholarship to study computer science. Lily, now 17, was preparing for her senior year of high school. She had blossomed into a confident young woman with leadership skills that made her the natural captain of her volleyball team. Her dream was to become a doctor, inspired partly by the nurses and doctors she had met during my years working at the hospital. With her compassionate nature and determination, I had no doubt she would achieve her goal. As for me, I had finally fully retired at 57. After years of balancing work and raising the children, I was enjoying a more relaxed pace of life. I volunteered at the local library, tended my vegetable garden, and delighted in having the energy to attend all of Lily's volleyball games and be present when Jackson came home for visits. Our life together had settled into a comfortable routine. We had long ago worked through the most acute pain of Amanda's abandonment. The children knew the truth about their mother, though. I had always been careful to tell it in a way that preserved their sense of self-worth. I kept a few photographs of Amanda displayed in our home and had saved mementos from their early years for them to have someday. Jackson had processed his feelings about his mother through therapy and later through writing. He rarely spoke of Amanda anymore, having accepted that his family consisted of me, Lily, and the close friends who had become like extended family. Lily occasionally expressed curiosity about her mother, wondering if she had inherited her artistic ability or her love of music from Amanda. I answered these questions honestly but gently. That summer was particularly sweet. Jackson was home from college, and we were preparing for his 20th birthday celebration. Lily was working part-time at the local animal shelter and spending her free time researching colleges. Our days were filled with simple pleasures, barbecues in the backyard, movie nights with homemade popcorn, and long conversations on the porch swing as fireflies danced in the evening air. One Tuesday morning, I was in the kitchen baking cookies for Lily's study group while Jackson sat at the table completing his summer internship application. It was a perfectly ordinary moment in our quietly happy life. The doorbell rang and I wiped my hands on a dish towel before answering it, expecting perhaps a package delivery or one of Lily's friends. Instead, I found myself face to face with a woman I almost did not recognize. She was thin with expensive clothing and perfectly styled hair. Lines around her eyes and mouth aged her beyond her 43 years, but the eyes themselves were unmistakable. I had seen those same eyes every day in Lily's face. Amanda. After 15 years of absence, my daughter stood on my doorstep looking at me with an expression I could not quite read. Was it nervousness? Determination? Regret? Whatever it was, she did not appear the least bit ashamed to be showing up after all this time. I stood frozen, unable to find words. 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Where had she been? Why come back now? What did she want? But my throat had closed up and all I could do was stare. "Hello, Mother," Amanda said finally, her voice deeper and more polished than I remembered. "It has been a long time." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just an acknowledgement of time past, as if she had been away on a long vacation rather than having abandoned her children for 15 years. Before I could respond, I noticed a man standing a few feet behind her on the walkway. He wore an expensive suit and carried a leather briefcase. His presence confused me until Amanda spoke again. "I have come to see my children," she stated, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "This is my attorney, Mr. Daniels." Attorney. The word hit me like a physical blow. Why would she need an attorney to visit her children? Finding my voice at last, I asked, "Why now, Amanda? Where have you been for 15 years? She ignored my questions completely. "I understand my children have been living here. I want to see them immediately." The coldness in her tone sent a chill through me. This was not a mother who had missed her children desperately. This was something else entirely. "Amanda," I began carefully, "the children are grown now. Jackson is in college and Lily is almost done with high school. You cannot just walk back into their lives and expect—" She cut me off sharply. "Actually, I can. And I will. You had no right to keep them from me all these years." I was stunned into momentary silence. "Keep them from her." Was she serious? The attorney stepped forward then. Mrs. Marshall, my client contends that you unlawfully took custody of her minor children 15 years ago. She merely asked you to watch them for a brief period while she attended a job interview. When she returned, you and the children were gone. My jaw dropped open. This could not be happening. She was accusing me of taking her children after she had literally signed them over to me and disappeared. That is absolutely not what happened. I sputtered, indignation rising through my shock. Amanda left those children here with all their belongings and a signed guardianship document. She abandoned them. Amanda's face hardened. I did no such thing. I asked you to watch them for an hour. I had a medical emergency and was hospitalized. When I was finally able to return, you had moved away with my children. I have been searching for them ever since. The audacity of the lie left me breathless. I opened my mouth to argue further when I heard a voice behind me. Grandma, who is at the door? Jackson had come into the hallway curious about the prolonged conversation. He stood a few feet behind me, his tall frame tense with concern. Amanda's eyes widened as she took in the sight of her son, now an adult. For a moment, her composed facade cracked, and I caught a glimpse of genuine emotion. Then she pushed past me into the house. Jackson, she breathed. My baby boy, look how you have grown. Jackson took a step backward, confusion written across his face. Who are you? He asked, though I suspect from his expression that he already knew the answer. I am your mother, sweetheart, Amanda said, moving toward him with arms outstretched. I have been looking for you for so long. Jackson backed away further, looking to me with panicked eyes. Grandma. Jackson, I said as calmly as I could. This is Amanda. And yes, she is your biological mother. The word biological was deliberate. I wanted to make it clear that while Amanda had given birth to him, she had not been his mother in any meaningful sense of the word. Jackson's face hardened in a way I had never seen before. Why are you here? He asked Amanda directly, no trace of warmth in his voice. Amanda seemed taken aback by his lack of enthusiasm. Perhaps she had expected a joyful reunion, the prodigal mother welcomed home with open arms. If so, Jackson's cold response clearly surprised her. I am here to reconnect with you and your sister, she said, her tone softening into something that sounded rehearsed. I have missed you both so much. There has not been a day that I have not thought about you. Jackson looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he simply said, I have a class project to finish, and walked back toward the kitchen without another word. Amanda stood stunned watching him go. Then she turned to me, fury replacing the facade of maternal love. See what you have done! You have turned my own child against me. The attorney placed a restraining hand on her arm. Mrs. Curtis, remember what we discussed. He then addressed me directly. Mrs. Marshall, my client is prepared to pursue legal action to reestablish her parental rights. She believes you have deliberately alienated her children and is seeking immediate visitation as well as potential damages for parental alienation. I felt as if I had stepped into some bizarre alternate reality. This could not be happening. After 15 years of absence, Amanda was not only reappearing, but threatening to sue me for caring for the children she had abandoned. I think you both need to leave, I said, finding strength in my anger. If you want to pursue this legally, you can contact my attorney, but I will not allow you to disrupt my grandchildren's lives with these false accusations. They are my children, Amanda hissed, and I am taking them back. They are adults, and nearly adults who can make their own decisions, I countered. And they have already seen that you care more about yourself than about them. Now please leave my property before I call the police. The attorney handed me his business card. "We will be in touch, Mrs. Marshall. My client is very serious about pursuing this matter." As they turned to leave, Amanda looked back at me with cold eyes. "You will regret taking my children from me, Mother. I promise you that." After they left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. Jackson came back into the hallway, his face pale. "Was that really her?" he asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "What does she want?" "Why now?" "I do not know." I admitted, "But whatever happens, we will face it together." Jackson nodded grimly. "We need to warn Lily before she gets home. And Grandma, we should probably call a lawyer." As I looked at my grandson, now speaking with the wisdom and calm of a man rather than a boy, I felt a surge of pride through my fear. Whatever Amanda's game was, she had underestimated the strength of the family we had built in her absence. True to her word, Amanda filed a lawsuit against me the following week. The allegations were outrageous: kidnapping, parental alienation, emotional distress, and demand for financial compensation. She claimed I had deliberately hidden the children from her and poisoned them against her during her alleged efforts to find them. I immediately contacted Jessica Parker, a lawyer I had met through my grandparents' support group years earlier. Jessica specialized in family law and had helped several grandparents navigate custody issues. When I explained the situation and showed her Amanda's original letter and guardianship document, she was confident we could defeat the lawsuit. "This is absurd," Jessica said after reviewing Amanda's complaint. "You have documented abandonment legal guardianship established through proper channels and 15 years of being these children's sole caregiver. No judge in their right mind would disrupt the children's lives based on these false claims." Despite Jessica's reassurances, I was terrified. The weeks leading up to our court date were some of the most stressful of my life. I gathered every document related to the children's care school records, medical files, the original guardianship papers, police reports from when Amanda disappeared, and statements from longtime friends and neighbors who had witnessed our family life over the years. Jackson and Lily reacted differently to the news that their biological mother had returned with legal demands. Jackson was angry and resolute, immediately offering to testify about his clear memories of being left with me and his mother's complete absence from his life. Lily, who had been too young to remember Amanda leaving, was more conflicted. Part of her was curious about the mother she had never known, while another part was furious at being treated like property to be claimed rather than a person with feelings and agency. "What if the judge makes us go with her?" Lily asked one night, her voice small with fear. "That will not happen," I assured her with more confidence than I felt. "You are 17, and the court will consider your wishes. Jackson is already an adult. Besides, we have the truth on our side." The day of the hearing arrived. I dressed carefully in a conservative blue dress and jacket, wanting to project the image of the stable, loving grandmother I had been for 15 years. Jackson insisted on coming despite having to miss a day of his summer internship. Lily, too nervous to sit through the proceedings, stayed home with Maria, but made me promise to call her the moment it was over. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with just a few rows of benches and a raised desk where Judge Roberta Wilson presided. Amanda sat at one table with her attorney, looking polished and confident in an expensive suit. I sat at the other, with Jessica clutching a folder of documents and trying to control my shaking hands. Jackson sat directly behind me, a reassuring presence. Amanda's attorney presented their case first. He painted a heartbreaking picture of a young mother who had left her children with their grandmother for a brief period, only to suffer a medical emergency. According to their story, Amanda had been in a car accident on the way to her interview and spent weeks in a hospital across state lines. By the time she recovered and returned for her children, I had moved away with them, leaving no forwarding address. The attorney claimed Amanda had spent years searching for her children, hiring private investigators, and following false leads. He suggested I had deliberately hidden the children and poisoned them against their mother. He even implied that I might have fabricated the guardianship document, pointing out that Amanda had no recollection of signing such a paper. As I listened to these blatant lies, I felt physically ill. How could she sit there and fabricate such a story? What kind of person would abandon their children and then return years later to claim victimhood? When it was our turn, Jessica calmly and methodically dismantled their narrative. She presented the original notarized guardianship document with Amanda's signature, verified by a handwriting expert. She showed the judge the handwritten letter explicitly stating Amanda's intention to leave her children in my care. She submitted police reports documenting Amanda's abandoned car near the Canadian border and statements from Amanda's former landlord confirming she had cleared out her apartment before disappearing. Most damning of all, Jessica produced Amanda's old passport, which we had found among her abandoned belongings. Immigration records showed Amanda had crossed into Canada the day after leaving the children with me and had later traveled to Europe. There had been no hospital stays, no desperate search for her children, just a young woman who had chosen a different life. Throughout our presentation, I watched Amanda's face. She maintained her composure for the most part, but when Jessica presented the passport evidence, I saw a flash of panic in her eyes. Her attorney leaned over to whisper something in her ear, and she shook her head slightly. Judge Wilson, who had been taking careful notes throughout both presentations, looked up at Amanda with a piercing gaze. "Mrs. Curtis, these records directly contradict your testimony. Can you explain the passport stamps showing you in Paris just weeks after you claimed to have been hospitalized in New Hampshire?" Amanda shifted uncomfortably but maintained her story. "Those records must be incorrect. I was in the hospital. I would never voluntarily leave my children." The judge's expression made it clear she did not believe this explanation. She turned to me next. "Mrs. Marshall, I see you have raised these children since they were very young. Do they know about their mother's letter and the circumstances of her departure?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. As they grew old enough to understand, I shared the truth with them in age-appropriate ways. I always kept photos of Amanda in our home and spoke of her respectfully. I wanted them to know their history while also feeling secure in their present. Judge Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "And the older child, Jackson, is here today." Jackson stood when the judge acknowledged him. "Yes, Your Honor. I would like to speak if I may." The judge granted permission and Jackson moved to the witness stand. At 19, he looked remarkably composed in his button-down shirt and khakis, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Jackson," the judge began, "you were 4 years old when your mother left you with your grandmother. Do you have any memories of that time?" Jackson nodded. "I remember the day very clearly, Your Honor. It was raining and my mother brought us to Grandma's house with our backpacks full of clothes and toys. She hugged us goodbye and said she would be back in an hour. She never came back. And in the 15 years since then, did your mother ever contact you? Phone calls, letters, birthday cards?" "Never," Jackson said firmly. "Not once in 15 years. The first time I saw her again was when she showed up at our door last week. How do you feel about her return and her desire to reestablish a relationship with you and your sister?" Jackson's expression hardened. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the woman sitting over there is not my mother. She gave birth to me, but my grandmother is the one who raised me, who was there for every skinned knee and school play and nightmare. My grandmother is my parent in every way that matters. I have no interest in a relationship with someone who abandoned me as a child and now only returns when it suits her." I felt tears prick my eyes at Jackson's words, at the strength and clarity with which he spoke his truth. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then turned back to Amanda. "Mrs. Curtis, your son's recollection differs significantly from yours. I am also troubled by the documentary evidence contradicting your claims. Would you like to revise your testimony?" Amanda glanced at her attorney, who nodded slightly. Her composure finally cracked. "Fine, I left them," she admitted, her voice bitter. "I was 28 with 2 kids and no help. I was drowning. I could not do it anymore." "So you do recall signing the guardianship document?" the judge pressed. "Yes," Amanda said quietly. "I signed it." "And the letter relinquishing your parental responsibilities?" "Yes." Judge Wilson's expression was stern. "Then why this lawsuit? Why return after 15 years with false accusations against the woman who stepped up to raise your children?" Amanda was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice so low the court reporter had to ask her to speak up, she said, "My husband died last year. He was quite wealthy. In his will, he left trusts for any children I might have. I never told him about Jackson and Lily. After he died, I thought maybe it was time to reconnect with them." The truth, when it finally came out, was painfully clear. Amanda had not returned out of maternal love or regret for her abandonment. She had returned because there was money involved. Her husband's death and the financial provisions for children she had never mentioned to him had suddenly made Jackson and Lily valuable to her again. The courtroom was silent as this revelation sank in. I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication that the truth was finally being acknowledged, sadness at the confirmation of Amanda's selfishness, and profound relief that her false narrative had collapsed. Judge Wilson looked at Amanda with undisguised disapproval. "Mrs. Curtis, I find your actions deeply troubling. You abandoned your children, disappeared for 15 years, and then returned with false accusations against the woman who has dedicated her life to raising them. The court finds no merit whatsoever in your claims." Turning to me, her expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Marshall, the court commends you for stepping up to raise your grandchildren, and for doing so with such obvious love and dedication. Your legal guardianship of Lily remains in effect until her 18th birthday. As for Jackson, he is an adult capable of making his own decisions about relationships." With a final rap of her gavel, Judge Wilson dismissed the case, and it was over. Amanda sat motionless at her table as her attorney gathered their papers. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, 15 years of unspoken fear finally released. As we left the courtroom, Amanda approached us in the hallway. Her attorney tried to stop her, but she shook off his hand. "Jackson," she said, her voice smaller now, stripped of its earlier confidence. "Could we talk just for a few minutes?" Jackson regarded her coolly. "What could you possibly have to say to me now?" "I know I made a mistake," she said. "A terrible mistake. But you are still my son, and Lily is my daughter. Could we not at least try to know each other?" I held my breath, leaving this decision entirely to Jackson. He had every right to walk away without another word. Jackson was quiet for a moment, then spoke with a maturity that made my heart swell with pride. "I do not know you, and you do not know me. That was your choice, not mine. If you want to try to build some kind of relationship, you need to understand it will never be mother and son. That ship sailed 15 years ago. And you need to understand that any relationship with me or Lily will be on our terms, not yours." Amanda nodded, seeming to accept this limitation. Could we start with just coffee sometime? You and Lily if she is willing?" Jackson looked at me and I gave him a small nod. This was his decision to make. "I will ask Lily if she wants to meet you. One meeting, no promises beyond that. And for the record, we do not want or need any money from your husband's estate." A flash of something like shame crossed Amanda's face. "I understand," she said quietly. On the drive home, Jackson was silent, processing the events of the day. Finally, he spoke. "Do you think I should have refused to meet her at all?" "No," I said honestly. "I think you handled it perfectly. You and Lily deserve the chance to ask questions to get some closure. What happens after that is entirely up to you both." "She is not a good person, is she?" he asked, a trace of childlike hurt in his voice. I chose my words carefully. "I think your mother has made selfish choices. I do not know if that makes her a bad person or just a very flawed one. But her choices reflect on her, not on you or Lily. The two of you are kind, compassionate, and strong despite her absence, not because of it." When we got home, Lily was waiting anxiously with Maria. We told her everything that had happened in court, including Amanda's admission about the financial motivation behind her return. Lily listened quietly, her expressive face cycling through emotions, anger, hurt, confusion, and finally a kind of sad acceptance. "Do you want to meet her?" Jackson asked his sister. Lily thought for a long moment. "I think so," she said finally. "Just once to see her face to face. After that, I do not know." A week later, the siblings met Amanda for coffee at a neutral location. I stayed home, giving them space for this difficult encounter. When they returned, they described an awkward meeting where Amanda tried too hard to establish an instant connection, asking surface-level questions and making empty promises about future involvement in their lives. They had asked pointed questions about why she left and where she had been receiving vague, self-serving answers in return. "I do not think I want to see her again," Lily concluded. "Maybe someday, but not now. It feels like she sees us as a project or an obligation, not as people." Jackson agreed. "She does not really want to know us. She wants to play the role of mother now that it is convenient for her. I told her we would contact her if we ever wanted to talk again, but not to expect it anytime soon." In the months that followed, we returned to our normal lives. Jackson went back to MIT for his sophomore year. Lily focused on college applications and her final volleyball season. Amanda made a few attempts to contact them with texts and emails, but eventually these tapered off as well. I suspected that once she realized there would be no easy relationship or access to her late husband's money, her interest waned once again. As for me, I found myself processing my own complex feelings about my daughter. Despite everything, I still loved Amanda. I mourned the troubled young woman who had felt so desperate that abandoning her children seemed like her only option. I grieved for the relationship we might have had if things had been different. But I also felt an immense gratitude for the gift her absence had inadvertently given me, the privilege of raising Jackson and Lily, of being their constant, of building our small but mighty family. 6 months after the court case, we gathered for Jackson's graduation celebration. He had completed his sophomore year with honors and secured a prestigious internship for the summer. Lily had been accepted to 3 colleges and had chosen to attend the University of Pennsylvania on a volleyball scholarship. Our little family had weathered the storm of Amanda's return and emerged stronger for it. As we sat in our backyard surrounded by friends who had become family over the years, I looked at my grandchildren with overwhelming love and pride. They had faced the pain of abandonment and the shock of their mother's selfish return with grace and wisdom beyond their years. They had chosen to define themselves not by the parent who left, but by their own strengths and values. I had learned through this journey that family is not defined by blood or legal documents. Family is built daily through love, presence, and unwavering support. It is created in midnight fevers and homework struggles, in celebrations and disappointments, in showing up day after day, year after year. Amanda may have given birth to Jackson and Lily, but they became who they are because someone stayed. Sometimes life hands us unexpected challenges that seem impossible to overcome. 15 years ago, I thought raising 2 young children in my 40s would break me. Instead, it revealed a strength I never knew I possessed and gave me the greatest joy of my life. The envelope Amanda handed me that rainy day contained not just a letter of abandonment, but unknowingly a gift beyond measure. What unexpected challenge has transformed your life? Have you ever been thrust into a role you did not choose but came to cherish? Please share your stories in the comments below. And if my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need to hear that. Sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as our greatest challenges. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the family we choose can be even stronger than the family we are born into.